Welcome to the McGrath-Mudgee Region Podcast Network, your source of real estate news, market insight and education. In this special Movember series, we're sitting down with the members of the McGrath-Mudgee Region team and special guests from our community to open up the conversation and break down stigmas associated with men's mental health. At McGrath-Mudgee Region, we believe that when having a platform so ingrained in the community as ours, it's important that we are helping to support and grow that community in a positive way. In today's episode, Lucas Sheppard sits down with Amanda Mitchel, life and personal development coach, to talk about her journey with mental health, the challenges she's faced, and coming out the other side to empower others to work on and sharpen their mental health.
Today we welcome Amanda Mitchel. Been really excited for this one. Amanda reached out to me about a year ago when we did last year's event, saying we did an awesome job, and she wanted to get on board, so I held her to that. Amanda's the idea of interviewing Amanda today is to dive into her own issues, her struggles that she's had herself, and to also hear the women's perspective, because over the last couple of episodes we've sort of spoken about men's health, but obviously in men's health there's a whole other component to the women in our life, and also women probably share the same struggles as men do. So really excited to do this one with you today, Amanda. She's a bit of a seasoned podcaster, we've just found out today, so we're going to put it to the challenge. But to give you a bit of an intro on Amanda, she's kind of a bit of a quiet achiever. She's a women's health performance coach, a life coach, a motivational coach. She does podcasts for Raw Coaching, Whole 30 coach, and more importantly, a mum to 3 boys and husband to Craig, which is probably a big job in itself as well. So I've known Amanda for quite some years now, so I'm kind of going at a bit of an edge today to really dive into her story, because although we've been friends and in the same community and that sort of thing, I don't actually know Amanda's story. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to be talking about this today, and I feel like it's definitely something that, we're sort of leaning to more towards getting more information out there for people, I feel, these days. So I'm excited to talk about this. I'm a bit nervous about telling my story, but at the same time, if anyone has ever listened to my podcast, I tell it a fair bit on that. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. We spoke a couple of days back to say, well, I actually don't know your story, and it's one of those things that unless you really reach out to someone, you may not feel comfortable in talking about it. But I think that's the importance of it, is talking about certain issues with you. So, you kind of gave me a little bit of an introduction that, struggles for you came at a pretty early age, and you've also had, history of it in your family and things like that. So I guess firstly, let's talk about your own personal struggles and where it stemmed from, what age, what you did, etc.
Cool. Yep. So I used to, when I was in my early teens, suffer with panic attacks. That's where it all started. I feel like probably a myriad of things, like parents separating, moving to a new town, all that sort of stuff, started it. And just not having the right tools to manage it, I suppose. So my mum did what she thought she knew best, and she took me to the GP, and he just prescribed me with a medication. So there was no psychology, no working through any of the stuff that I had going on in my head. It was just, here you go, have some pills and this will fix you sort of thing. So I suppose it did put a Band-Aid on things for a very long time. I've sort of explained it to a few people. If you haven't taken medication before, I suppose you don't know, but at the same time it definitely has a place, and I really respect that place, but it's also can be a Band-Aid. So at some point you got to deal with the stuff that's going on, if that makes sense. So I was then on anxiety medication for years and years and years and didn't really ever question it. I was told I had a chemical imbalance in my brain and that I would be needing to take medication forever. And then it wasn't until I got into my early 20s that I sort of started questioning, things going, well, hang on a minute, why do I really need to take these? Like, I feel fine, like, maybe I don't need to. And it wasn't until I started delving into that and trying to, coming off medication altogether. I haven't taken medication for, I was 22 when I stopped taking medication. That's when things, I suppose, really started to unravel, because I had to then deal with years and years of stuff that I hadn't dealt with. So I think that although, my anxiety and stuff started when I was younger, because I was taking medication, it helped, if that makes sense. But then in my early 20s, I then had to, deal with it in a completely different way.
So do you feel like it was just delaying the root cause of the issue?
For me,
yeah.
Yes. And that's good for some people. They're okay with that. But I suppose once I started looking into side effects, all this sort of stuff, things that I'd had going on with my body, I was like, well, I actually don't want to take them anymore. I want to deal with this stuff now, and I'm ready to. It definitely opened up a big bucket of stuff that I had to deal with, and it took me quite a few years to get through all of that. But once I got to the other side, it was life was different and better, I would say.
Of course. So what were some of those things that you exited to? You mentioned, psychologists and things like that. What did you personally do?
All of them.
Yep.
Until I found the right one. So I would have spent, I reckon, 10 grand on psychologists. I tried yoga. I was already someone who did a lot of exercise, but I also did the other things, I drink a lot of alcohol and I go out a lot, and instead of dealing with my problems even then, before I started going down the path of natural therapies and things, I would just get drunk, drink a lot of alcohol to get rid of it. But then the next morning you wake up and it's
same old thing.
It's the same old thing, but it's worse. So then I would just grab a few friends, we'd go out for lunch and start all over again. Let's go drink.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. People sort of go to their emotional home, whether it's drinking, whether it's, whatever it may be, going comfort in seeing people or whatever. I think, you mentioned for you, you spent 10,000 in psychologists. Psychologists didn't really hit home for me. I know other people that I've spoken to, it really does hit home, and it sort of gets out the core of you and diving into certain issues where it didn't help for me. Certain other things helped. And when I look at, you do similar things to me in the sense that you exercise a lot, you take care of yourself through physical and mental health, podcasts, those sort of things. Do you think that's what kind of broke you through?
Eventually, yes. I definitely had to deal with some root things that were going on, and in order to do that, for me, I had to be by myself. So initially I thought I tried lots of different things, and then I was working in a very stressful job at the time too, and I don't think that gave me the space to actually be able to deal with my issues. So I took long leave from that job, and I flew myself to Byron Bay, and I stayed there for a month and just started dealing with all my stuff by myself, thinking this is how I have to do this. So it was it was meditation, walking, just really light sort of stuff, and I also did a lot of NLP type stuff, and at the time I didn't really know what I was doing. Now I understand what I was doing, but it was definitely NLP, retraining my brain to think a different way about.
So for people who don't know NLP, do you want to just touch on that?
Well, it's something that a psychologist would use to help somebody with depression or anxiety to change the way that they think about things, basically. So
you think it's just a method of trying to learn to love yourself again?
And also think about things differently. So it's rather than thinking about it in a bad way, it's what are the good things from that particular thing, and to focus on those things rather than focusing on what's happened, the drama, get through it, but then, okay, now we're through that. Now we need to focus on the positives of that thing. if that makes sense.
Does.
Yeah. So I did that to myself. I didn't even know what I was doing really. But, meditation, that sort of thing, and a lifestyle change as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it sounds like a similar breakthrough to me because mine came through just life coaching rather than through a psychologist and that sort of thing. But it was almost the same thing where I learned to focus on positive things in my life rather than playing that victim mentality. And,
For sure.
And it was a really good breakthrough. I don't think everyone has their own struggles, and I'm sure you do now, but it's just learning to just snap out of that train of thought and going into another one and thinking about all those really good things you have in your life.
Definitely.
And that really helped me, and it sounds like it helped you too. But it sounds like you still continued on with those problems because, as we spoke about earlier on in the week, you had you've got 3 boys.
Yep.
And you had postnatal.
Yeah, depression. So when Xavier, my middle child, was born, it wasn't straight away. I got it when he was 6 months old.
Yep.
So, obviously it was different to the first bout of mental health that I had. It was a completely different thing. So then I had to relearn a new way, if that makes sense. Now I'm here with 2 kids. I can't just escape my life. I can't just fly to Byron Bay for a month and meditate on the beach. And, I had to deal with it at home. But there was there was a lot of things going on, a lot of stresses in our life at that time as well. But it was not a controllable thing. Postnatal depression is different to what I went through before.
Yep.
If that makes sense. I could not get a hold of my mind. It's something that takes over you in a way that is completely different to, like a life struggle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You can't. It was different, and it's hard to explain it. And what got me through that time actually was a psychologist.
Okay.
So it's like I'd been down the path of psychologist before, and I didn't want to go down that path again, but I managed to find a really good one, and it worked. And I was able to discover lots of things about postnatal depression, which I didn't know before. Didn't have it with Harry, so it was all new. But, and it probably took me about a year, I think, to recover fully from postnatal depression. Yeah.
How are you travelling now?
Good. Yeah, good. I was a bit worried about having Angus, actually. That was probably one of my biggest concerns about having a third child, was going through that again. It was like, okay, I hope this doesn't happen to me again, because it can. But I was really, really conscious of, lifestyle things as well this time around that I wasn't so much before, because I hadn't gone through it with Harry. So I was like, I'll be fine. This is fine. We're doing this. We're doing that. All these things. And then when it all came tumbling down, it was like, whoa, hang on a second. I'm here again. How did I get here again? And then when I looked at my life and my lifestyle, it wasn't what I had been practicing again, if that makes sense. I'd put myself to the side in order to care for 2 kids and run a house. And by doing that, it exacerbated the postnatal depression that I was going through, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I didn't get that this time around.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
That's good.
Thank goodness.
Yes.
So, but like I said, I was preparing in case I did. So, doing all the things and making sure that I made time for myself and trying not to stress as much about the things I can't control, all of that sort of stuff. So,
Okay, so going to dig in pretty deep here. I personally have never, I've had people who I've known who have, unfortunately taken their own life.
Yeah.
Let's dive into your story, Amanda.
Okay.
Let's talk about your dad. Your dad committed suicide, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
So talk to me about it. Hopefully you feel comfortable in it. It's a pretty deep story. I don't know the story, so let's hear it.
Well, it's a long story, I suppose, if you delve into the history of my dad, his life, his lifestyle, and just where it began, I suppose. It's something I can talk about because I have, I guess, been dealing with it for so many years.
Yeah.
And I've also delved into my podcast and done a little bit of stuff on it as well. Yep. So my dad was the eldest of 6 kids. His father was the eldest of 8 boys. Wow. And it kind of,
eight boys, sorry.
8 boys.
And he was...
my dad was, that was my dad's father.
Yep.
He was the eldest of 8 boys. And his father took off when he was young. So my grandfather was a very hard man.
Yep.
Extremely hard.
Yep.
He raised 7 younger siblings.
Yep.
Back in those days, that's what they did. Right. So for my dad, when he came along, obviously, he was different to my grandfather. Grandfather was a very hard man, not very emotional. My dad was a very emotional person. He needed somebody a little bit more emotional, I suppose, to take care of him. And he had I suppose he had later in life issues with that. And a myriad of other things happened in his life that, ended with him with his mental health issues. But it started from that. So having his relationship with his dad, he really suffered with that. But, then my mum left him as well, which he never got over.
Yep.
And he tried to, get back into dating and all that sort of stuff, and nothing ever he never really found someone who he felt connected with, I suppose, and lived by himself. And then I think the straw that broke the camel's back was us living here, being so far away from him. He was in the Blue Mountains, and not being able to see us very much. That really got to him a lot. And also he had a work injury, and he was a person who would keep fit, healthy, like he was very busy, always, doing lots of things with his life. Sport, all that sort of thing, riding motorbikes, and then he couldn't do any of that stuff anymore. So he couldn't even mow his lawn. So I feel like, watching him over the years, he deteriorated, and he was in a hole. He was in a deep hole, and he couldn't get out of it, obviously. So it's one of those things, I guess. If you don't deal with the stuff that's going on, that it just piles up, and if you don't deal with it, it's like there's too much to deal with at the one time, if that makes sense.
I think, unfortunately, in life, some people more than others get dealt bad hands.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
I used to focus on those bad hands that I'd been drawn, and I'm hang on, I've got a lot of other good things, but it's obviously something that you can't explain why someone will do that. And instead of, for me, I can snap out of it and go, all right, well, let's focus on the good things. But obviously people can't.
Yep.
How old were you, Amanda?
I was 17, so I was a kid. It's changed. I suppose it's changed over the time. Like in the beginning, it was all very big shock, I suppose. So
that was going to be my question. Did it come as a massive surprise to you?
Massive shock.
Yep.
So we always knew, in the last couple of years, Dad wasn't well, and I'd seen him in the July at my sister's 21st, and he seemed fine. Yep. He actually seemed okay. He didn't seem like he was, deeply depressed. He didn't look that. And I suppose I think he had a really good way of hiding his feelings, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of people do, because I've never actually heard of a story where this has happened and someone's gone, you know what, I did expect it. It's always been a massive shock, a massive surprise. Why didn't they talk to me? What on earth were, so they put on this facade to, I guess, to hide it. Whether that's a male thing, a female thing, just in general, I don't know. Whether it's just a facade that you try and get away with to then, I don't know. But that must have been incredibly tough as a 17-year-old. You know, women wear emotions a lot more than men. Men put that tough on, but like a 17-year-old, daddy's girl, finding out that would have been so incredibly hard.
It changed my life. It changed my life forever. And my sister is the same, obviously. We were very close to our dad. So straight away it was like, this is not happening. And it took a really long time for me to accept it. And I suppose, especially when I had been medicated for anxiety, which was also a partially depressed medication as well. And then in my early 20s, coming off that, it was like there was always a mask over that, if that makes sense. And then all of a sudden I had to deal with all of it, like all of it. So, I mean, for me, I suppose I grew up very quickly after all of that. Yeah. You have to really, you don't really have a choice, I suppose. And it definitely, it continues to, I continue to learn more and more about it all the time. Yeah. And it's led me down the path of where I am today and what I'm doing, and, the work that I do with women. The work I'm doing at the moment isn't just, I used to have my gym, but a lot of the time there was a lot more going on inside that gym in terms of helping people with this sort of stuff that they had going on. So, I really enjoy working with people for that reason, because I feel like if you can manage some of those things that are happening in your life and, work on your health and your fitness and your mental health, then, you can get through things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think, that's one thing that, I see in you with, the list of things that you do at the beginning of the podcast. I think that's a great sort of, legacy for people to, and one that, I'm sure you'd be doing for Dad, to help people in struggles.
Yeah, definitely.
And I certainly find that through CrossFit, which we mutually do. We go out there, it's not the fitness, it's the way it makes, the endorphins that you get. It's the community, it's the family, it's the connections, all that sort of stuff that really sort of helps. And like that's been a good game changer for me. So credit to you for doing all that. Like it must be on your mind all the time. Like, losing, I think for guys and their dads, there's a bond there, but it's, correct me if I'm wrong, for a female, dad's your hero, you know what I mean? Like
definitely.
Dad's the, and, we touched on it in our very first episode that the man is the tough guy, puts on this mask of, having to be the provider and
definitely
not trying to fail. And, unfortunately for Daddy, he got dealt bad hands and it's horrible that he felt the only way out was to do what he's done, but that's the unexplainable thing.
He was also, he used to smoke a lot of marijuana as well. So in the end, because he was in so much pain from his work injury, he was going through court cases for his work injury. There's a lot of stress. He had no money. Like, it was just like this constant battle of waking up every day in pain, taking painkillers, plus all the rest of the stuff he had from his childhood and things, that were all there. And I guess I understand it, if that makes sense, from going through things myself. I understand his mental health and where he was at. But I feel like back then as well, I feel like, we're going back 20 years now, it's different to what it is now. That it was seen for that demographic of males to just get up and put your boots on and get on with it.
Of course.
So I feel like he didn't have a lot of help and a lot of support and people around him to talk about his issues, and so it was all just kept inside.
It's not like the resources you have now. Like, if you're feeling down, you can jump on YouTube, get on a heap of motivational things, podcasts, psychologists. Back then, as your grandfather passed on, he's sort of
hard
to his kid, hard. And that's even how I was brought up, was hard. Like, you couldn't wear your emotions. You cry, toughen up. That sort of thing. So, you've got 3 boys.
Yes.
How does that sit with you? You mentioned before that it's actually has passed through your family.
Genes.
It's not genes. So that's something that I can't understand, like the gene component of it.
Yes.
I think, I can understand if people are dealt bad hands in their life, that can have an emotional roller coaster in a negative or positive way. When it's a genetic thing, what does that look like in your eyes?
I don't actually know. I've only just started delving into the genetic side of it. It's very scientific. which I'm not very good at understanding.
Yeah.
I don't have a science mind brain, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, it makes sense that your genetic makeup can actually make it worse or interfere with that in some way. And if you look back through family history and see that, it's interesting, but it's also made me very mindful. I've got 3 boys. I'm a very soft mum. Craig would say I'm too soft.
Yep.
But because of, I suppose, of what I've seen being hard can do, I guess he's sort of the more harder parent, but they can always come to me for that really soft parenting and, allowing them to always feel their emotions and sit with their stuff. And I suppose it's made me a very mindful parent in terms of things that you say to your kids, how you react to certain things that are going on, and teaching them to manage their emotions now and work through things rather than, sweeping things under the carpet or, it's I mean, I'm enjoying it, but it's also like it's a bit stressful at times as well.
I'm sure it would be, but I think that's important to stem it from an early age, is to be okay with their emotions. I think that's where it probably goes wrong.
100%.
When you're older in life, you don't really know the root problems of things, and that's probably where it comes from. So, you've got a tough ride ahead of you, I guess, with 3 boys and a husband as well. So male dominated in the house.
I know I need some female things going on. So if you go to my house, you'll see a lot of pink things. I buy pink rugs. I buy pink cups. All this sort of feminine stuff, because I'm bringing the feminine energy in, because I'm surrounded by, even our dog's a boy.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. So how do you, I think that's one really important thing I wanted to try and gauge is a woman plays a very important part in a man's or a boy's life as a mother, wife, that sort of thing. How, what sort of advice would you give to other women, that sort of thing, to treat their husbands who might be going through a bit of a tough time? Because, I think, you could ask almost anyone that a woman has that sort of very pivotal part in a man's life, and if it's not going right, then that could be the main issues. Yeah,
I suppose if someone's got a partner that's suffering or going through some mental health issues, I mean, the first thing is that they need to have a place, or the partner needs to be someone that they can rely on, or someone that they can come and talk to, a place where they can feel comfortable talking about their problems. Yep. I also find men need more time, a couple of days sometimes, to figure things out. And then, women, we tend to be like, well, what happened? What's up? What's wrong? And we want an answer now. And men don't know what I might be not talking for every male, but mostly they need a little bit more time.
And they don't talk about it probably too, because girls and girlfriends, absolutely okay to just talk about everything.
Yeah, and I definitely can relate to that with Craig when he's been going through things. I don't know if he wants me to talk about this or not, but too bad. It'll take him a couple of days, and I've had to learn ways of dealing with him, and how I need to give him more space, more time to figure it out for himself a little bit before he can come to me and then give me the information, and then I can help him, if that makes sense. But the biggest thing I would say is if someone has a partner that's suffering from mental health issues, is look at their lifestyle, try and help them with lifestyle changes, but also encouraging them to get some help if they need it as well. Yeah. And it's not embarrassing. It's just like your physical health. It's like if you've got, a pulled hamstring or anything like that. I really think that if our mindsets change around mental health and about what it really is, and that all humans suffer with not suffer, but we all have these feelings inside of us at some point in our lives. It might not be classed as depression or anxiety, but someone might not realise that that's what it is, but, if we stop labelling it so much, I feel like, that it's probably a little bit more accepted, and people can talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Rather than labeling it as, oh, that person's got depression or whatever, or that person's just going through a really rough time and they need some support. Like, I feel like, you know, sometimes when we're labeling things all the time with these, diagnosis, it's not necessarily always a helpful thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at that two ways, but I feel like if we change our thoughts and feelings about mental health and that all humans, you know, go through these things, that it's a really normal part of life, it sort of calms you down a little bit, and people can sort of say, oh, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm okay. I've just got to deal with this thing that's happening in my life right now.
Yeah. It is very important. Like, you know, I think you can just, you know, disguise mental health. You know, you mentioned if you pull a hamstring, you go to the doctor or physio or that sort of thing because you kind of need to, whereas mental health, you can just sort of, sweep it under the table and that sort of thing. So I think that would be my bit of advice too, is just to find out what works for you, but just start somewhere. Is it a psychologist? Is it chatting to your best mate? Is it whatever it may be, reading a book, listen to some, you know, motivational things, like, because there's so many tools and resources out there that, you know, have helped me along the way, and sounds like it's sort of helped you too. So, yeah. Anything else you want to add, Amanda? Is there sort of any other tips or advices that you could sort of, you know, give anyone?
Not really. Like you've said, you know, there's lots of resources, lots of things out there, lots of information. I mean, we can probably be bombarded with information, but what works for one person might not work for the other person. But I mean, I suppose, you've got to start somewhere.
Yep.
You really do. If you're in that space where you're not feeling good, you need to get into a space where you're feeling better, and that might just be, you know, choosing to go for a walk around the block every afternoon after walk to, you know, give yourself some space or time or whatever. It might be changing your diet. It might be, there's lots of lifestyle things that we can do that we don't do enough of these days that are very simple, like moving our bodies is really important for mental health. Like, it's one of the most important things that you can do for mental health. And I know that most people don't move their bodies. So, you know, it's a very common thing for people to not go to the gym, not do any type of walking. You know, we're living a very, very, very lazy lifestyle, I would say, these days. And our mental health issues are only getting worse. So the first thing I would say is that, movement of your body, looking at things that you're doing in your life, you know, limiting alcohol. Everyone, I think most people know what to do. It's just putting it into place. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story, because it's probably hitting some home strings and that sort of thing. So I'm incredibly proud of you.
Thank you.
Because I have known you for quite a long time now, and to actually chat about it, and like, it's crazy to think that we actually have never had this conversation, and I've known you for probably 15 years, more.
Maybe more. Yeah, no, about that, I reckon.
About that, you know, not so much on the where we're catching up on family drinks and that sort of thing, but we you know, through our families and that sort of thing, we've known each other for a long time. We've never actually had that conversation. So thank you so much, because I know how hard that would be to, you know, bring up those old, you know, memories, and like, that's so good of you to do what you've done, and I know your family have pulled through it really well too. So thank you so much. I guess, you know, on those couple of offerings that you have for people with your gym and your life coaching and that, how do we find you? How do you know, because is it just for women or is it for men as well that you're trying to sort of?
No, not just for, my gym was just for women, but I don't just work with women.
Yeah.
So, the gym side of things was for women only, because Mudgee didn't have one and women really wanted it. So that's what I gave them. It's closed now, obviously. And my life coaching and the Whole30 coaching and all of that stuff, you can find me. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, on the socials. So it's Raw Coaching Co. or Mudgee Whole30.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks again, Amanda. It was a pleasure having you on board.
Thank you, Lucas.